The last thing I remember is the hum of the highway. The specific, angry hum of the I-10 coming out of Phoenix. My son Leo was asleep in his car seat, his little mouth hanging open, and my daughter Maya was counting blue trucks. She was obsessed with blue trucks. I was driving us to a new start, a real start. I had a lead on a job at a call center in Tucson. It wasn't much, but it was 40 hours a week, and it came with a bus pass. I was so high on that hope, I was so stupid. I remember checking my blind spot, and then nothing, just the hum, then a different hum, a fluorescent hum, the kind that sounds like a trapped bee buzzing inside your skull. I opened my eyes, and I was staring at a ceiling tile with a water stain that looked exactly like the state of Florida. I was on a cot, a thin, plastic-covered mattress that crinkled every time I breathed. The air smelled like bleach, instant coffee, and unwashed bodies. A shelter. I was in a shelter. My whole body felt like it was filled with sand. I tried to sit up, and that's when the choice was made for me. A woman in jeans and a fleece vest was standing over me. Clipboard. Kind eyes. The worst kind of eyes to see when you wake up in a place like that. "You're awake," she said. "I'm Sarah, the night caseworker. You were brought in by paramedics around 2 a.m. They found you unresponsive in your car at a rest stop just outside of town." Unresponsive. The word hung in the air. I tried to speak to ask the only question that mattered, but my voice was just a scratch. My kids. Where are my kids? Sarah's face didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted into a professional, neutral gear. That's when I knew. That's when the antagonist of my life, the one I'd been running from for years, finally stepped out of the shadows and sat down on the cot next to me. His name wasn't a person, his name was failure. "Your daughter, Maya, and your son, Leo, are safe," Sarah said, her voice carefully measured. "They are in the temporary custody of the Arizona Department of Child Safety. When the paramedics found you, you were incoherent. You couldn't provide a local emergency contact. The police had to act in the best interest of the minors." She kept talking, something about a hearing, something about a case plan, something about supervised visitation. But all I could hear was the word custody. They took them. The state took my kids. I tried to explain. I told her about the job. I told her about the call center. I told her I was just tired. I was just so tired from driving. I wasn't on anything. I swear I wasn't on anything. I had been clean for 11 months. 11 months and 12 days. I passed every drug test at the sober living home in Phoenix. I had the papers in the car to prove it. I had the job offer. "They found a pipe in your glove compartment, honey," Sarah said, her voice still kind, but now it felt like a knife. A glass pipe with residue. My stomach dropped through the floor. The pipe. That wasn't mine. It was from before. It was an old pipe I forgot was there. I kept it as a reminder, a horrible, stupid reminder of what I never wanted to be again. I forgot to throw it away. I forgot to purge every last ghost of the person I used to be. And now that ghost had woken up, put on my face, and stolen my children. I tried to get up. I had to go to the police station. I had to explain. But my legs were rubber. My head was spinning. Sarah put a hand on my shoulder. Not to comfort me, but to hold me down. "The car is impounded. The police have a report. Right now, you need to rest. You need to be coherent for when the caseworker calls." Rest. How could I rest? My daughter was probably scared. My son, he needed his specific blanket, the blue one with the satin edge, or he wouldn't sleep. They were out there in some stranger's house or a state office, wondering why mommy didn't wake up. And I was here, on a cot that smelled like 1,000 other people's sorrows, making the first choice of this new nightmare reality. I chose to lie back down. I chose to be quiet. I chose to be a good, compliant victim so I could get my kids back faster. That was my first mistake. That was the choice that started the fall. For 3 days, I was a ghost in that shelter. I did everything they told me. I went to the mandatory life skills workshop where a man with a ponytail told us to visualize our goals. I visualized putting my hands around the neck of the cop who searched my glove compartment. I went to the dining hall and ate the lukewarm oatmeal. I called the DCS hotline every hour on the hour. They always said the same thing. The case was being assigned. Wait for the caseworker to contact me. On the third day, I got a message to call a number, a Detective Alvarez. My heart jumped. This was it. They realized the pipe was old. They saw my clean record. They were going to give me my babies back. I called from the shelter's payphone, my hands shaking so bad I could barely press the buttons. "Ms. Vance," the detective said. His voice was flat. "We ran the prints on the pipe. Yours are the only ones on it. We also ran a more comprehensive tox screen on the blood sample taken at the hospital." Blood sample? I didn't consent to a blood sample. "You had trace amounts of methamphetamine in your system. A very small amount, but enough to indicate recent exposure. Not enough to be actively high, but enough to prove it was in your body." I opened my mouth to scream. It wasn't true. It couldn't be true, but then I remembered. The rest stopped before I passed out. I was so tired, so bone-tired. I had pulled over to get gas, and a guy at the next pump, he was friendly. He offered me a cigarette. I hadn't smoked in a year, but I was so stressed, so desperate for something to take the edge off. I said yes. I took one cigarette, just one. He must have laced it. He must have. It was the only thing. It was a setup by the universe, by fate, by the ghost of my old life, who was still lurking, waiting to drag me back down. I tried to explain this to the detective. It came out as a jumbled, pathetic mess. A guy at a gas station, a cigarette. He probably thought I was a liar. I probably sounded like a liar, because that's exactly the kind of pathetic excuse an addict would make. "The DCS caseworker has all this information, Ms. Vance," the detective said. "Your hearing is scheduled for next week. I'd advise you to get a lawyer." A lawyer? With what money? My job at the call center was gone. My car was impounded. I had $43 to my name and a bed in a room with 20 other women who snored and cried in their sleep. I hung up the phone and walked outside. I sat on the curb in the desert sun, and I watched a mother push a stroller past the shelter. She was on her phone, laughing. The baby was asleep. It was such a normal, simple thing, and it felt like a personal attack. That night, I didn't go to the dining hall. I didn't go to the workshop. I sat in the common room, staring at the TV they kept on the news channel, and I saw him, the man from the gas station. He was on the screen, a mugshot. They were running a story about a drug trafficking ring busted at a truck stop. They showed his face. The guy who gave me the cigarette, he was a dealer. He was handing out laced cigarettes to truckers, to travelers, to anyone, to create new customers. He wasn't a ghost. He was real, and he was the reason my kids were gone. For a brief, electric moment, I felt a surge of power. This was it. The proof. I could take this to the detective, to the caseworker. This exonerated me. I wasn't using. I was a victim of a crime. I ran to the payphone, my heart pounding with a hope so fierce it hurt. I called the detective's number. It was after hours. I left a frantic message. "Detective Alvarez, it's Jess Vance, the man from the gas station. I saw him on the news. He was arrested. He laced my cigarette. This proves I wasn't using. Please, call me. My kids..." I went to bed that night actually smiling. For the first time in days, I felt like I had won. The next morning, Sarah, the caseworker, found me before breakfast. Her kind eyes were gone. They were just tired now. "Ms. Vance," she said, "Detective Alvarez asked me to give you a message." I stood up, ready to pack my things, ready to go get my babies. He said the man's arrest changes nothing. The tox screen shows the drugs in your system. The pipe has your prints. You made the choice to accept a cigarette from a stranger at a truck stop while your children were asleep in the car. You made a choice that put them at risk. The court will see that as a lapse in judgment at best, and a pattern of reckless behavior at worst. I felt the floor give way. It wasn't exoneration. It was another nail in my coffin. My attempt to prove my innocence was just more proof of my failure. I hadn't won. I had just provided the antagonist with more ammunition. I had given him the final move. The man from the gas station wasn't the enemy. I was. My own stupid, desperate choices were the enemy, and I had just handed them a signed confession. I sat back down on the cot. I didn't go to breakfast. I didn't go to the workshop. I just sat there, staring at the water stain that looked like Florida, and I felt the last flicker of hope inside me die. I was at the bottom, the absolute, true bottom. My kids were gone because of a cigarette, because I was tired, because I was weak, and there was no one to blame but the face in the mirror. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. The fluorescent lights never changed. There was no day or night in that room, just the constant buzz. Women came and went from their cots. Someone tried to talk to me, and I just stared through them. I was a hollow thing, a mother-shaped shell with nothing inside. I thought about Leo's blanket. I thought about Maya counting blue trucks. I thought about how I would never hear her count again. And in that absolute void, in that moment of having nothing left, not even hope, I saw it. A detail. Something so small and stupid it made me want to laugh. The blanket. The blue blanket with the satin edge. It wasn't in the car with them. It was in my bag. I had packed it in my duffel bag because I was going to wash it at a laundromat in Tucson. I had it, right here, under my cot. I pulled the bag out and unzipped it. There it was. Leo's blanket, soft, worn, smelling faintly of him. I held it to my face and breathed in. And in that breath, something shifted. It wasn't hope. It was something harder. It was clarity. The whole time, I had been fighting the wrong battle. I was trying to prove I was innocent. I was trying to explain. I was trying to be the perfect victim. But the system didn't care about innocence, it cared about safety. They didn't take my kids because I was evil. They took them because they thought I was a danger. And every time I argued, every time I tried to prove how unfair it was, I just looked more unstable, more desperate, more like the addict they already saw in their files. I had to stop fighting them. I had to show them I understood. I had to show them I wasn't a danger. I had to become the one thing I had been too proud to be, compliant. Not just on the surface, like the first 3 days, but truly, deeply, boringly compliant. I had to give them exactly what they wanted. On Monday morning, I walked up to Sarah at the front desk. I didn't have a frantic story. I didn't have a plea. I just had the blanket. "I'm not going to call the detective again," I said. She looked up, surprised. "I'm not going to fight the talk screen. I'm not going to argue about the pipe." "Okay," she said slowly. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to sign up for every class you have. Parenting, anger management, relapse prevention. I'm going to get a job, any job, and I'm going to save every receipt. I'm going to find a stable apartment, not a room, an apartment with my name on the lease. I'm going to become the most boring, predictable, safe person in the state of Arizona, and I'm going to do it without complaining once." Sarah looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded. "There's a wait list for the classes, but I know a woman at a laundromat on Speedway who needs a sorter. It's minimum wage, it's cash, but it's a start." I took the job. I sorted other people's dirty sheets and towels for 8 hours a day. My hands were raw and cracked from the bleach. I lived at the shelter for 3 more months. Then I moved into a studio apartment above a garage. It was smaller than the shelter cot, but it had a lock on the door. I went to every class. I sat in the front row. I took notes. I got a sponsor from a local NA group, even though I was clean, because I needed someone to vouch for me. I did it all without a single outburst, without a single but. I became a robot of recovery. At the 6-month review, I sat across from the DCS caseworker. A new one, a woman named Patricia who didn't have kind eyes, just efficient ones. I placed a binder on her desk. It had tabs, bank statements, pay stubs, lease agreement, certificates of completion from 5 different programs, a letter from my boss at the laundromat, a letter from my landlord, a letter from my sponsor. And at the back, in a plastic sleeve, Leo's blue blanket. I'm not here to tell you I was a victim, I said. I'm here to show you who I am now. I made a choice. It was a bad one. My kids paid for it. It won't happen again. Patricia didn't smile. She just opened the binder and started reading. She read for a long time. When she finished, she closed it and looked at me. Visitation, supervised, starting next week. If that goes well for 3 months, we talk about reunification. I didn't cry. I didn't thank her profusely. I just nodded, because the fight wasn't over, but I had finally learned how to fight the right enemy. I wasn't fighting the cops, or the system, or the man at the gas station. I was fighting the part of me that thought I deserved to give up. The first visit was in a sterile room at a state office. They brought Maya and Leo in. Maya was wearing a dress I'd never seen. Leo was clutching a different blanket, a ratty green one. They stared at me like I was a stranger. For one horrible second, I thought I had lost them forever. Then Maya tilted her head. Mommy, do you still have my blue truck? And I realized, in that moment, that the bottom isn't a place you fall to and stay. It's a place you fall through. And if you're lucky, and you fight smart, you land on the other side. You land in a small, boring apartment with a binder full of receipts, waiting for your kids to remember who you are. I still wake up sometimes in a cold sweat, hearing that fluorescent hum, smelling that bleach. But then I look at the nightstand. Leo's blue blanket is there, folded neatly. And I remember that I woke up. I woke up and I chose to stay awake. The shelter in Tucson took a lot from me, but it also gave me the only thing that ever really mattered, a chance to earn my way back.